The team at The Grout Guy are leading experts in regrouting, waterproofing, and tiling services nationwide. Property managers find comfort in their 10-year waterproof warranty on all full shower regrouts. Visit thegroutguy.com.au to rejuvenate your property's tiles and grout now.
Today, we have a guest who is not a property manager. Well, I don't think he was a property manager. We'll find out in a minute. And this is Andy Reid, who I'm going to describe you as a high performance coach, but I don't know if I've actually got that right. So I'm going to sort of let you do a little bit of an intro about yourself, Andy, if that's all right, who you are, what you do, and the good stuff you do in the real estate industry.
I'm basically a guy with a big mouth and an accent, right? If we're to boil it down to brass tacks. But I started in the real estate space, having been in hospitality management back in the UK, and transferred pretty much all my skills from hospitality through to the real estate space. Got into sales, tried to run by the textbook of sales, and failed miserably, and nearly put myself in a loony bin. So then I went back to my sort of natural skill set from a hospitality point of view, and it all sort of kicked off from there. Found a real passion for auctioneering in 2012, like proper geek stuff, like passion, and just fell in love with it. It became a drug, and not for the attention. In fact, the opposite for the attention. It's the fact that it put me in a state of flow, and I found my flow state when I was calling an auction. At first, I called it escapism, which is a very negative connotation. It's the negative way of viewing flow state. But yeah, I eventually managed to find my way through to a flow state, which makes us really, really happy. And now I was in sales doing 60 to 90 transactions a year. But I was working in a family business. So my then father-in-law, brother-in-law, then wife and sister-in-law all worked in the same business with a whole bunch of other people as well. And so my ex-wife was a property manager, and they had about 600 managements. And my father-in-law, for all his sins, was incredible at retaining talent. He had 4 or 5, well over 10 years in service in his PM department. So the longevity of his staff in there was just tremendous. And then my former partner, I encouraged her to start her own rent roll. So I helped to kick into gear with all of that. And now she's running really well with all that sort of stuff. She's brilliant at what she does, bless her. And I've been helping property managers, BDMs, collaborating with the likes of, your Sarah Chincotters, your Hermione Gardners, and those sorts of people. Mainly, a lot of it is because in 2020, when COVID went bananas, and obviously in Melbourne, we got hit harder than everyone from a lockdown point of view, I found myself falling into like an industry mental health and well-being advocate, like by accident. So because my auction business, I come out of sales and I was just running an auction business from 2018. And so obviously when we all got locked down and didn't have many options to do, right? So I started this show called The Silver Lining. Out of nowhere, I actually woke up at like 2:30 in the morning and said, right, I got to start doing a chat show. And the whole purpose of it was to help maintain a sense of connection during a very disconnected time. For people in our industry, the vast majority of the humans in our industry, they thrive on connection. They need connection. It's like a necessity for people in our game. So yeah, started that chat, and it really kicked things off, and was working and helping Leah Calnan a lot when she was president of the RAIV, just with regards to getting messages out and supporting and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, I just seemed to grow this bit of a support base in the property management space. And I think it helps that because I was so close to PM myself and essentially helped in PM business and whatnot, it's not like I'm completely naive to the cut and thrust of property management and what have you, right? So yeah, and I think me sharing all my mental health stuff, that's the other thing that I've been really quite prominent with is I've been very open with my own mental health trip. Started officially when I got the rubber stamp on the forehead in 2015, and that's been a real interesting trip of self study. And off the back of that, I've been asked to talk to a whole bunch of people about a whole bunch of different things, and property managers, BDMs, and then I've got a book coming out next year, so which is really cool. So yeah, man, I've had a few fingers in a few pies.
Yeah. And so would you call yourself a high performance coach, or what would you call yourself now if someone said, what sort of coach are you?
I'm a success coach. So what I mean by that is success obviously comes in a million different ways. And it comes in a million different flavors, and it is very much dependent and subjective on the individual, right? The whole point of the book and the whole point of me doing a lot of the stuff in the coaching space, because I didn't want to be a coach. Like, I really resisted it for a long time partly because this can sound really crude. I didn't want to help arseholes make money.
Yeah.
I just didn't. And I didn't want to be at the mercy of that for income. But in 2020, it's like all of the arseholes went really quiet and all of the really good humans stepped up. And that's when I was like, geez, hold on. There's so many more incredible humans in this game than what I gave credit for. And so that's when I became a lot more open in terms of helping and supporting and collaborating and interdependence and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, and the whole point of the book, it's sort of been a bit of an accumulation of all this stuff. The purpose of it is to try and help success feel more accessible, because we all hear so many of the same words and so much of the same vernacular around what success looks like and feels like and all this sort of stuff. But if with all of us knowing it so much, we get it shoved down our throats on a regular basis, and yet why aren't people doing it? There's an obvious disconnect. So that's kind of what the purpose of the book is to try and help make it feel like it is doable for more people. And then in the property management space, in the BDM space in particular, just understanding what success even represents for them is a really interesting conversation, because property managers, they see themselves in many respects as it's their job. They go in, they stamp stamp their time card in, they do loads of work and get beaten from pillar to post by everyone on the planet. It's always their fault, whoever is looking at them. And then they go away, they clock out, and then they go home, and then they're like, what did I achieve for me? Really? So hopefully that's what I can help out with a little bit. I mean, as you can tell, I'm a bit of an open book, so it's not like I'm infallible. It's not like I'm some God's gift to anything. But you know what I mean? If I can help a few more normal people like me feel a sense of success in their lives, then happy days.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's interesting because the sales side of things are so driven by money. So very much their success is always linked to, how many sales they do. And what was actually interesting was I went to the real estate, the REWA ball for, like, I think they call it the REWA.com ball a couple of weeks ago. And I'm not a huge fan of that awards because it's all driven by money. It's like who's in the $10 million club, who's in the $20 million club, who's done this many sales. And I'm not loving that, but I guess that's for the sales people and that's what they love, where you've got the REWA Excellence Awards, which are more on marketing, and you've got rookies, and you've got communication and sustainability and so many other things that, that's great in the space. But we just naturally have your sales reps where they probably only see success as that one goal. But then property managers, it's interesting because I feel like where we've got it wrong in the past is by putting people on that vertical hierarchy, where you start as reception and then you go to leasing, and then when you've done leasing you can go into property management, and when you've done property management you go to BDM, and then when you've done BDM you go to head of department. But since doing these podcasts, I remember recording a session with he must have been about late 50s and male. and he was a leasing consultant. And I was really fascinated why a 50, late 50 male would be a leasing consultant. And it completely changed my thoughts, because I thought, do you know that the leasing role is actually the most important role out of everything? Because if you can get the right tenant in place, the rest of the whole tenancy is absolutely perfect and hardly any work for the property manager. Yet we're putting 18-year-olds who don't have that life experience, don't have that natural gut instinct, into one of the most important roles. And so I feel like we've got it all around. And I also don't like seeing people thinking success is, going from reception to leasing to property management to BDM, because some people are genuinely just happy in their role. And I've got a great team of property managers that just love being a property manager. But we naturally have language around the whole, BDM head of department, which I find just fascinating.
You could almost sort of link it to the sort of capitalist society that we live in, right? Like we always, and it's the materialistic viewpoint that Western cultures in particular really hold on to and cling on to as status symbols, right? And we can't deny that for many of us, or if not all of us, because we do work so much, a lot of our identity is connected to our work. And so for a lot of people, they will, because of stereotypes or perceptions, from a macro point of view within the industry, there'll be a lot of people that will see leasing consultant and hear all the vernacular around it being at the bottom end of the totem pole, right? And therefore feel a little bit inadequate in their role. And it's really interesting. You mentioned about, you've got a lot of PMs that are just happy being PMs. Part of the book is, so I break it down into 4 sections, right? And it's success, connection, influence, and happiness. And there's a real interesting study that I did a load of homework on. I've mentioned before that I was a geek in auctioneering. I'm just a geek. I am. And there's this study that was done on 1 million military personnel in the US Army in 2021. And the whole study was around, does success lead to happiness, or does happiness lead to success? And a lot of the time, it's a little bit chicken and egg sort of conversation for a lot of people. But they did this study, and it was really, really comprehensive study. And it was shown pretty much unequivocally that the happier the soldier was, the more accolades they got and the higher their test scores were. And the ones that felt obliged to be there, or the ones that felt conscripted to be there, or what have you, across the board had lower test scores, aptitude scores. They received less medals at scale than any of the ones that were happy in their role. And so it's one of these really, really interesting things where happiness is, it's a really underrated superpower. I think it really is. Because if you're happy, everything's easy. Everything's easy. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Even if nearly swore then. I didn't ask if I could swear. Even if you stuff up, right? If you're happy and you stuff up, the way that you analyze that mistake is a million times different to if you're not happy and you make a mistake. Right. So it's really interesting. You say, again, people are happy in what they do because their version of success is a content life, for example. They want the money because they want to get their paycheck so that they can go home and look after their family in comfort and happiness and all the rest of it. And they have that defining line between work and play. Who's to complain about that, man? Like, seriously. And I think, like I said, a lot of the industry does get driven towards materialism, right? A lot of it does. And when it comes to sales, and we can't get it twisted, ultimately, every business has a P&L to answer to, right? We can't get away from the material facts that without making money, your business ain't going to exist and no one's going to have a job. Right. So we do need to make sure that there's a degree of practicality to this conversation. But I completely agree. There is absolutely more to success than the dollar. it does make the world go round and it helps to give you choices. But if you're making enough money to give you enough choices, then what's the problem?
Yeah, exactly. Now, on your Instagram, you said something that I absolutely loved, and I want to hear you talk about it a little bit more. And
Okay.
are you nervous?
Maybe a little bit.
And it was the theory behind the working smarter, not harder.
Ah,
Words that goes around, and I loved it because you said on your post, and I believe this to an absolute core. Everyone that knows me can hears me harp on about this. And your words were, you have not earned the right to work smarter when you haven't worked harder in the first place. I always talk about this and 100% agree with it. Tell me a bit more about your the thoughts around that and yeah, your opinion.
right. So and especially if you look at each generation, right? Well, let's go macro and then bring it in. If you look at each generation, every generation has a sense of responsibility. They feel that they have to improve on the previous generation's work, right? And when you look at a lot of people that are coming into not just real estate space, but any space, and before anybody starts getting a bit concerned, I'm going to start shitting on Generation Zs or Alphas. Don't worry, I'm going to back you up in a minute. They come into this space with an inherent belief that they need to come in and reinvent the wheel. It happens a hell of a lot with sales, but it happens all across the board, right? And then we have this technology generation that is, the technology side of things. It's exponentially going ballistic, right? Obviously, and as a result of that, and as a result of the rate of evolution in technology, the residual effect that it has on society is that they feel that everything else has to advance and change and all that sort of stuff just because technology is, right? Now, the challenge that we have with that, and when we bring it into real estate, is the fact that um, technology is seen by a heck of a lot of people, and this might step on a couple of toes. It's seen by a heck of a lot of people as a way of not having to do so much work, right? And it's a complete misconception. You talk to the Sarah Bells, the Kylie Davises of the world, Peter Straver made around prop tech, right? And they get really shitty about this because technology was never designed to take over human beings. It was designed to assist human beings in their growth, right? And the problem is we've got it twisted in terms of the role of technology. Everyone's harping and whinging, or say everyone, lots of people are whinging about AI taking over the world and all that sort of jazz. And yet we are doing anything and everything to make sure that AI does as much for us as is humanly possible. Now, that's not going to mean that you don't have to do as much work. It means that it gives you less excuse to be more of a human being for more people. It's supposed to give you the time back in order for you to scale your humanity, right? Now, when it comes to the whole topic of reinventing the wheel, nothing will ever replace hard work. Nothing. There is no substitute for it. People have tried all sorts of illegal substances and everything, and there's nothing that stops it from being a real cornerstone piece of anything that's worth having, right? Whether it's hard work in business, in your job, in your career, in your relationships, in your partnerships, with your loved one. Love is hard work, man, right? When was love ever easy, right? So the problem that a lot of younger people coming through have, or with people that have this mindset that they're so entrenched in advancement, is that the fundamental cornerstone pieces of humanity will forever be there. And hard work, connection, like I said, influence, happiness. Find me a bit of kit that's going to replace any of that shit. Find me a bit. Find me anything. I dare you. And so as a result of that, there's been unfortunately, there's a generation that are getting led down a garden path, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault because you've got the Tim Ferrisses, and I'm not knocking him, because he never wrote that book to tell people that they only have to work a 4-hour week or whatever, right? He didn't write that book for that. He wrote that book having done the hard yards and then getting himself into a position where he can work a 4-hour work week, right? It only took him 15, 20 odd years to get there, of hard work, right? So it ain't just some magical formula. Now, he cleverly turned it into a book that made it perceived it to be a magic formula, but it's simply not the case. So nothing's ever going to substitute hard work. And with us being in a human-focused industry, the technology, it's supposed to be there so that it helps you to free up your time to be more human to more people more often. It's not there to give you more time sitting in your chair, drinking your coffee, picking your navel, right? That's when you will become obsolete quite quickly.
Yeah.
You take the sales side if I can dip into the sales side just for a second.
Yeah.
Right now, because the supply is catching up or caught up with the demand, right? And this is pretty much almost in every state. Supply is catching up, or it has caught up. And as a result, the industry is getting found out for the whole thing of being an order taker as opposed to being a professional in the game. And that has been brought about through a degree of laziness, because technology has led us down the garden path of feeling that we don't have to do as much work to get the same amount of work done. It's kind of exposing the fact that we're just not talking to enough people and being human enough of the time. And so what can you expect? You talked about before we cracked on about, you can give everyone the formula, but, the recipe, but the sauce is always going to taste different. Well, why the hell do you think that we have an industry problem when it comes to fees and things like that and commissions and whatnot? It's because the consumer cannot see any discernible value from one person to another. And that's got nothing to do with your efficiency. It's got nothing to do with technology, because 7 out of 10 are going to have the same bits of kit, right? It's got nothing to do with your professional photos. Oh, but our professional photos are really good. Oh, come on, Batman. I had one I saw, right? Well, this made me giggle and get really angry at the same time. I was marking some awards for something, and I won't name which awards because it might give it away. And one of the things that someone hung their hat on as to why they are such good salespeople is that they transferred their video quality to 4K. I'm like, on what planet is a consumer going to give two stuffs about having a 4K video? Seriously. Like, how? So, and it's the same applies to property management. And when it comes to the value in their service, people aren't paying for the transaction. They're paying for all the other shit. They're paying for the lack of a need to be dacking their pants every time the rent's due. Right? Yeah. The value, and this is where it's all coming back. It's all getting shone right back on human behaviors and human beings. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety, certainty, and whatnot. All that hierarchy of needs. That's the stuff that people are paying for. Because otherwise, they just do it themselves. You could.
Yeah, and that's totally relevant for property management at the moment, because I talk a lot about transactional property management versus, what sort of going over and above. And we have found that not necessarily AI, but maybe VAs and offshores, they've replaced our transactional stuff. And so now that they've replaced our transactional stuff, which is potentially coordinating some maintenance, sending breach notice, checking rents, sending out lease renewal letters, just the basic stuff. And then that's really freed us up to be doing those extra things, like I sort of do annual investor audits, or I do property profiling and things like that. And that's where the landlords are needing help at the moment. They actually don't really care too much about the other stuff. it's all that value add that we need to get better at doing. And there's still people that are still stuck in their ways and saying things like, well, I shouldn't have to. But if you are going to replace part of your job role with AI and offshore, then you need to upskill yourself in the extra service, because property management's changed from 20 years ago to now. It's a completely different role that we are doing, and we have the ability to mold it into a way that works for us as well. So I think we're in a really good spot to be able to revolutionize it a bit.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to really highlight the effect that outsourcing, for example, has on your business is if you were to assess transparently how much time has been saved per task, right? For example, and then say, right, having this VA or these VAs or whatever, we are saving in our operation, we are saving 15 hours a week, for example. Okay, what are we doing with those 15 hours? How can we be strategic with these 15 hours? And I think a lot of people, because time isn't on the P&L, it's really difficult to be efficient with it. It is really difficult. We're crap. We're crap at being efficient as humans, right? So if we can actually put it into sort of a tangible dollars and cents-esque sort of mindset, we're right. Okay, we've got 15 hours of productivity we're getting back here, providing everything works well. So you can perhaps put a couple of hours off for wanting to get a bit of our lives back. Fair play. And we can put another hour, we probably waste another hour on fixing VA issues. Fair enough. So there's 12 hours there, right? 12 hours, like 2 and a bit hours per day if you're working 5-day week. What can we do? What can we strategically do with those 2.5 hours that will give us that sense of growth, but also that sense of fulfillment? One of the great things that a lot of this time gives us an opportunity to do, if you're looking at it from a revolutionizing point of view, we have a real opportunity to get a much greater sense of fulfillment in our roles, especially in property management, more so in property management, I'd argue, because you guys, you don't half get shit on from every angle, right? And the vast majority of phone calls that are getting made are crap ones. They are not nice ones, right? How good would it be for the morale, for the culture of your organization to spend even 20 minutes of that 2 and a bit hours that you're saving a day on making goodwill calls, for example, right? Or just doing feel-good calls. And there's no harm in saying, right, we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, we're doing it because we want to make sure that our customers are getting looked after. But 2, we want to feel good about what we do. There's no harm in that. And I'll tell you something now, I bet you a lot of your staff are going to be way more encouraged to want to give that a go, because you're saying, right, we want you to do this because we want you to feel good about your job and what you are doing. I want you to call these 10 vendors, these 10 landlords, and just check in with them, see how they're getting on. And you tell me the response you get off the back of making random phone calls. You could even go one step further, right? And say, right, to each of your senior property managers, for example, or each of your staff, you say, right, you've dealt with however many clients however many clients so far this month. Is there one that stood out as being really, really cool? Anyone, whether it's a tenant, whether it's a tradie, whether it's a landlord, whoever, who's been really cool? I say, Janet from bloody accounts and blah, blah, blah. All right. Here's $20. Go and buy him a bunch of flowers or something. Go send him a bunch of flowers as a thank you. Right. And you do that because you've created greater efficiency by doing the VA thing, right? So there's going to be some financial recoup from that. If not, why the hell are you doing it? Doing and having, I used to joke about it, but I probably should make a bit more of a dance about a RAC rate, a random acts of kindness rate. So how's your rack rate going? Because I used to work in hotels, right? And they used to talk about rack rate being the standard fare for a hotel room, right? And I've sort of nicked that off hospitality and turned it into something completely different. Um, like if we were to have a bit more of a rack rate in our property management organizations and giving each team member a time and or financial budget to, even if it's to go spend half an hour having a coffee with old Joan, who comes in and pays your rent every month on the dot, and he's just a lovely old lady. And the receptionist is the one that speaks to her all the time. How good would the receptionist feel by saying, "Hey, Joan, let's go have a coffee, dot"? How good would that be?
Yeah. And I was just thinking, like, it doesn't take a lot to give your team, a $500 Visa card for, 6 months of the year, whatever it is, just to do those things. Or if you're off to go do a routine inspection, calling the tenant saying, "Hey, I'm just on my way. Did you want me to grab you a coffee?" That type of thing is really, really lovely. That doesn't get done.
No, it doesn't. It does, and but the way that we need to, and this is where
Yeah.
leaders need to become accountable, because we are forever linking actions to the benefit of our consumers. We need to make a much greater effort to help show our team members and our people in our game as to the benefit for them for doing certain things. We need to make a much bigger effort on that. This is where I don't blame the new generation coming in. I blame leaders. I blame leaders massively, because one of the critical things, there's been loads of studies done on this. One of the most critical things that Gen Zs need to feel is growth. They need to feel personal growth. And they also, coupled with that, they need to feel that the actions that they are making and taking are contributing towards a greater purpose, which is one of the reasons why you're seeing so many of them jump on various bloody protests and all this sort of shit, right? I mean, tell me, I bet you if you could ask any of them to point out where half these wars are going on a map, they wouldn't be able to tell you, right? But they feel that they're contributing towards a greater purpose. So that's why they're doing it. So we as leaders need to tune into that. And we need to show them, right, I want you to spend half an hour with a customer that or someone that you've worked with, or that's outside of the organization but has worked with the business, whether it's tenant, landlord, tradie, whoever. I want you to spend half an hour just going and thanking them. Now, that's going to help with the business in terms of, you're going to actually help the business in its relationship outside of the four walls, and it's going to enhance our reputation. It's also going to make you feel really, really good, because you're going to feel like you are actually giving back to the people that are providing for your life. And that means that they'll get that sense of growth and fulfillment and giving back, but then they're also contributing to the greater reputation of the organization, whilst also contributing towards the happiness factor of the community, right?
Yeah. And I can tell you what, when that property manager gets a call from the tenant about maintenance or something like that, I can tell you right now that tenant's going to be a lot kinder and a lot more patient with sending out that plumber or that electrician, or that maybe that phone call that, took you 3 hours to respond to. It all comes around, doesn't it?
Honestly, man, the bank of goodwill is worth putting some savings into. 110%. Yeah, the practical benefits are tenfold. Absolutely. Whether it is the energy that you get back if it's a complaint, whether it's the Sparky who you've looked after really, really well, and all of a sudden the shit's hit the fan with the property, and they are happy to drop whatever to help you on that one occasion, right? It's that goodwill bank, or you could call it karma, or whatever sort of floats your boat. It's all going to help from a practical point of view, massively.
Yeah.
But I just feel that we need to, if we can help our people feel like it's benefiting them as well as, then everyone's going to win.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Inspection Express is no doubt the leader when it comes to streamlining property management tasks for landlords and property managers to save time and increase efficiency, particularly with their paperless inspection system. Their mission is to simplify the property management process, and now with their partnership with Tappy, there are some amazing new benefits to help deal with maintenance requests on site to further improve property managers' lives. Book in your demo with the team today.
Yeah, without a doubt. The we spoke about before I press record, the servant leadership style, which is very much that, helping the team look good, which is really what we should all be aiming for. But one thing that I think people are getting wrong, and I try to harp on about this a lot, is I've been known to say that a property manager will bitch and moan about being too busy, whether they've got a portfolio of 80 properties or a portfolio of 250 properties. It's just in their nature. And so one thing I hate seeing is when good business owners are trying to help. They're trying to bring in, maybe it's an offshore team, maybe it's a great program like Tappy or something like that. And then what happens is they do it as a Band-Aid fix to try and help alleviate. But I really need to stress the importance of actually knowing what hours that's going to take. So if you're bringing in an offshore team, that will be saving, like exactly what you said, so many hours. If you bring in something like Tappy, then hopefully that will give you capacity to free up your week by 10 hours. And then when you free up your week by 10 hours, there's also a ratio for calculating how many property managers a property manager can manage per hour. And I worked out this formula a long time ago when I had lots of part-timers at the time working for me. And I worked out that a property manager, depending on their experience and how long they've been with a company, should be able to manage between 3 to 5 properties per hour that they work. So therefore, if I'm saving you, I'm not going to be able to do my sums right now, but you know what I mean? If I'm going to save you 10 hours per week, then you should be able to handle another 30 properties, for example, or another 50 properties, and really getting clear with what your ratio is in your office. That's just my ratio. Getting really clear with that and making sure that if you are bringing in technology or something into the office, that it's very, very clear with what the goal is. And that goal is to save us this many hours. Therefore, I can increase your portfolio by this many properties. And I feel like that's not happening very well at the moment.
No, I agree. I agree completely. You could argue that with a lot of this technology, a lot of the leaders don't really know why they're bringing it in. They're doing it because everybody says it's dead good, right?
And they're just trying to keep the property manager quiet because they're saying they're busy.
Yeah, they're doing it. Yeah, they're doing it because because their PMs are whinging, saying, "Oh, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this," and they bring it in, and this is, you could apply this to any technology for anything, right? We as humans, we are such a Pac-Man sort of style consumership generation, right? We're just shit. We just gobble up technology like there's no tomorrow, right? We really do. And yet, like, I'm sat here looking at my iPhone, and I know for a fact that iPhone could create so much more efficiency for me if I could be asked learning how to use it a bit better than what I'm using it now. But I know I won't, because I'm a human being. And I like looking at sport on it and whatnot, right? And all this sort of stuff, yeah. So, and when it comes to business owners, and I wrote an article on this a little while ago for REB, and it was around, if you're going to take on a bit of technology, you've got to have a bit of an assessment guide as to as to how it's going to help the business. Is it financially viable? What sort of time efficiency is it going to increase? And can you use that time to a greater effect to improve the business in other areas? And make sure that you're not just looking at the one part of the business that it's helping. You need to look at what the flow-on effects are, what the butterfly effects are of bringing this bit of kit in the sense of, right, if I bring this bit of kit in to an accounts department, it's going to help to do X, Y, and Z, which will increase the efficiency by, say, 20% or 30% or 40%. Right. With that extra 40% efficiency, what can our accounts department do to assist the operation moving forward. Right. Well, maybe our accounts department, one of them, oh geez, one of them's qualified for capital depreciation, to do capital depreciation. What if one of our accountants, we hit up one of our accountants to call up some landlords and offer some from free capital depreciation schedules, for example, right? And what value adds can you bring into the business that maximizes that efficiency? Because it's not just making everyone's job easier. It's not a case of that, like this is what I reckon some of the technology companies need to really be accountable for this, because a lot of the time they sell it by saying this is going to make your life easier. Great, but then they wonder why their stickiness in terms of clientele isn't as great, isn't as good as what it should be, because these tech firms they sell themselves so much shorter sometimes, because they don't talk beyond the primary functionality and benefit of their bit of kit. If they would talk about the secondary and tertiary benefits potentially for an operation, then they would become a mainstay of that organization, wouldn't they? Because you're not just affecting the primary, you're affecting three tiers of an organization, right? So, like I said, man, a lot of the time, the people in the coalface or the new generations coming through, or our PMs on the front line and whatever, a lot of the time it's not their fault. A lot of the time it's the way that anything is broadcast to them that creates a disconnect, which then creates things like inefficiencies and disgruntlement and all that sort of stuff. And I think that, when you talk about happiness comes via things like certainty and safety and security and Maslow and all that sort of stuff. And that's the first thing that we need to really, without ignoring the P&L, right? At the end of the day, there's a fine line between a work stress and a severe case of depression. So, we've got to make sure we get that line right. But if we can create that superpower of happiness in the right way, then not only are the people that we serve going to be better off, and then they're going to be better off coming to us because their attitude will reflect our attitude towards them. But internally, that superpower leads to a much greater level of resilience. It leads to a much greater level of stress management. It leads to a much greater level of collaboration and a willingness to want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question for you. Going back with this working smarter, not harder, we don't like that. What's your take on businesses that are reducing down to 4-day work weeks? Do you think that that's enabling that? Do you think that that's an okay balance? But like when I hear of offices doing that, I have a healthy debate with one of the ladies in WA, and I say to her, what's next? 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, how much we're going to keep on pushing the limit. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's, like a fair, reasonable option, or re-enabling?
So the business that my former wife was in before she took over her own rent roll, that's exactly what they did. They operated a 4-day work week, right? And when because we were together at the time, and at that time it was actually tremendously beneficial for the functioning of our family, right? And as a result of that, the loyalty that she had towards that organization drifted up almost every single week. It was going up and up and up and up. And her ability to handle stress as a result of that went up and up and up and up and up. Now, the thing, it sort of relates to the whole work from home debate that's going bananas, right? Because we've got to be conscious of the fact that culture contributes towards success. And it's almost impossible to create and maintain a culture if people aren't seeing each other. Human beings don't connect via screens. We just don't. So, but this is the thing, right? As leaders, again, I'm going to put the responsibility on us, because we don't articulate effectively in the language of our people the benefits of working 5 days, right? Or the benefits of working from an office as opposed to at home. Okay. Now, I agree that technology and all this, all the stuff that we can do nowadays makes it a lot easier to provide a greater degree of flexibility and what have you. And I agree with that. But ultimately, we need people that actually they do want to be there. We do need them to want to be there. They don't need to be madly in love with their job and like get I heart PM tattooed on their arm or whatever, right? We don't need that. But at the same time, they're not going to be half as effective as an individual if they don't want to be there. And like the end. Now, I agree with the 4-day work week in certain instances whereby the person that agrees to work the 4-day work week, because a lot of the time 4-day work week means that you operate 10 hours a day for the 4 days, right? I would be making sure that there is an agreement on the efficiency of those 10-hour days, because I bet in a lot of instances, they will have the same amount of work getting done in the 8 hours or the 10 hours, right? Irrespective, the same amount of work could be getting done. So there would need to be an agreement whereby the same amount of work, of functionality, is getting done across those 4 days, as opposed to the same amount that would get done over a 5-day period. And there needs to be a much greater level of measuring for that functionality. If as long as you've got real good KPI measurements and whatnot, and everything's in place in terms of transparency with regards to functionality and operation and performance, then I don't see the problem with it. Because 4 days, it still means that you're in there for more of the week than you're out of it. Therefore, you can still operate a culture to a great degree.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see it. I wouldn't want to see it go less than that. But yeah, I agree. I think 4 days is okay. I actually agree with sort of what you're saying, was that I feel like we probably waste a lot of hours. I know that I waste a lot of hours because I've got 5 days to do it in. So it just means that you don't take as long for coffee, or you don't take as long for lunch, and you don't sit and chat as much because you've got more stuff you've got to get done before the week finishes. I think we naturally probably waste 6 or 8 hours a day anyway.
Why do you think, right? Why do you think we all do this shit?
Yeah.
Why do you think we become like these working like gods and goddesses in the week or two leading up to we going on holiday?
Yeah.
Why do we all of a sudden get so much busier? We don't. It's just that we've all of a sudden faced up to the amount of work that we've got to do because we've got a hard deadline, right?
Correct.
And if you could bottle that shit up, then my word would be tremendously powerful and efficient and all the rest of it. You're right. We do all waste time, but like for business owners, because there are ever increasing pressures around operational costs and whatnot, and that net profit margin is getting narrower and narrower and narrower with cost of essentials, cost of utilities, cost of employment is rising. So we're going to need to make sure that if that profit margin is going to be sort of thin, that we've got to have as much efficiency as we possibly can. Now, there's no such thing as 100% efficient human being. No such thing. But I think that it is fair to ask for at least an 80% efficiency from our people. I think that's fair. So we're saying that if you're going to work a 10-hour day, you're still okay to have 2 hours of going to the bathroom and having your lunch and having a break and all the rest of it. Like but I think that the 8 hours of productivity is absolutely fair. And this is where the way in which we have the conversation with our players, with our team members, needs to become a lot more collaborative, because that's another one of the big things that is so important, especially for Gen Zs. That sense of collaboration. No, they hate being told what to do. They hate it, which is because of the fact that if you just keep telling them what to do, they'll just piss off and start doing their own thing on their phone, right? Because they can, apparently. And they can in theory, but the practicality of it is very different, as we all know. But if you can talk to them in a collaborative way, in a much more, right, how can we get this absolutely nailed? Because I've got to tell you straight, the net margin of the operation right now is making it increasingly difficult to be able to keep hold of these 5 bits of kit. The monthly subscriptions that we're paying alone, it comes to $6,000 a month or whatever it is, right? So what can we do to make sure that we can maintain those costs? What can we do to improve the amount of stuff that we're doing so that we can keep these tools? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it has to be, we have to become, in our leadership, you talk about servant leadership. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I agree with the premise. I don't know if I agree with the name of it.
The name of it, yeah.
Because yes, we as leaders, we do inherently live to serve. But I think servant leadership for a lot of people gets translated as slave leadership, where you are at the mercy of your staff. And that's a horrible, toxic environment to be in because it grows resentment real fast. And the amount of leaders that are just getting burnt out so badly because they are just running around like blue ass flies for their for their staff members because that's what they feel they have to do. There's a difference between being a slave and a servant. And I talk about this with regards to the industry anyway, is that we all have a choice of either being a servant of the game or a slave to the game. And it's more around time management, whereby if we are in control of our time, then we are a servant in the game. And part of being the servant of the game is being able to say no. If you're a slave to the game, it's kind of like being a nice person versus a good human. A nice person lives to appease. A good human isn't afraid of the hard conversation if it's for the benefit of everyone long term. And that's the difference. That's the difference. And that's where we need to make sure that we get that right. Because I agree with your concept of leadership. I do agree. I think that and I say this to agents when I'm an auctioneer. My job, I say to them, my job's to make you look good, irrespective of the outcome. I say that so many times. But when it comes to our team members, we need to make sure that it is servant leadership, not slave leadership. Because man, that just does so many leaders in, and you see it, and it's horrible to see because they become shells of the humans that they once were. Like the ambition has turned to this grey-faced, no color, just completely drawn out human being that once was an ambitious person with loads of dreams, So it needs to, and the way that you would very, very quickly, if you are if you're a nice person, you're worried about upsetting any of your stuff. The best way of looking at that is reasoning with that is saying, right, if I don't have this conversation, am I going to be able to keep the doors open? If I don't have this conversation, how's it going to affect the bottom line? And you need to bring it back to a practicality. If you're struggling to justify it from a humane point of view, you have to bring it back to a practicality. It's like I said, you can be as kumbaya as you want, but if the bills aren't getting paid, no one's going to be in a job. And how much worse off is everybody going to be then for the sake of having one conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway,
So managing high performance teams, this is my last question for you today.
Sure.
Because I actually have about 20 questions I haven't asked you, so we might save them for later. And
I'm sorry. Hopefully it's been of value.
No, absolutely. You've actually answered them all in sort of a different way, but one of the ones that it's a bit of a personal question, but I know that there's a lot of business owners that I deal with that have this question, and I'd love to sort of see how you answer it. And that is that high performance obviously is very different for everyone. And I see business owners and leaders get frustrated that their team is not high performing. My mum keeps me humble because I feel like I'm
as they tend to do.
As they do, correct. I consider myself high performing, and I get quite frustrated at people that are not high performing, but it's because I'm frustrated they're not as high performing to my standard. So my mum used to say to me, well, Ash, maybe you're the unusual one, and maybe they are the ones that are completely normal. Maybe, and therefore she's saying that not necessarily believing it, but just trying to get me to be a bit more patient with others. So I guess my question is, how do you coach business owners and leaders that are high performing, that are frustrated at their team, when they are wanting them to be at their level, and maybe the team is high performing for their level, but it's still frustrating? Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And it, ultimately, they're not going to care about your business as much as you. That's the first thing we've got to let go of, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to care as much as you, nor should they, because at the end of the day, it's your business, it's not theirs, right? So why should they care as much? I think it's fair that they don't have to care as much, because that's why they're not business owners.
Yeah.
So that's first part of it. I think the second part is, before we start whinging and carrying on, we need to assess and make sure that we are doing everything that we can do in our power and in our knowledge and in our skill set and in our communication to ensure that the message that we have in terms of high performance and what that looks like and how that is represented in the organization, we are doing absolutely everything in our power to ensure that that is being truly understood by our people. One of the bigger mistakes that I see plenty of business owners make with this is that they try their hardest to convey the message of what high performance is and the standards, right? And they might have service standard manuals or culture manuals or whatever it is. But ultimately, the vast majority of their language and the vast majority of their communication is coming from them to the people, right? I think a conversation that a lot of business owners don't have with their people is actually asking their people what their definition of high performance is. And you'd be surprised by what some of the answers would be, because I dare say that for a number of people that are in your organization, their definition of high performance, it might not be to the letter of yours, but it might be a variation of a theme. And what that indicates is that they have got a degree of ambition that would make you happy as a business owner, but we've not tapped into it well enough as leaders. Generally speaking, it's not a people problem, it's a leader problem. And if we are truly high performing, if we are as high performing as what we say we are, right, as leaders, then it should be unequivocal in our people's understanding of what our expectations are. It should be unequivocal, because if it's not, we're not as high performing as what we think we are. Or we're good within ourselves with the functions of what we do, but it's kind of like the best thought leaders in the world are not the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones that can connect with those ideas the best, right? I dare say, there's countless people that would have come up with Uber, for example, or come up with Netflix or whatever, right? But ultimately, 99.999 recurring percent of them didn't make it happen, because of the fact that they didn't have the ability to influence, which is hence part of the book. They didn't have the ability to be able to influence people to understand, to engage, and to do. So we as leaders need to look at how we are influencing people. Influencing, it gets crapped on from a great height these days because it's been commoditized, right?
Yeah.
It's the flashy tans and the shiny bits and the bling bling and all that sort of, and the bedazzled whatever. But realistically, nothing ever advanced in humanity without influence. The greatest things to have ever happened in the human race happened because of influence.
True.
It's not because of the idea. It's because of how it was portrayed and connected and conveyed. So that's what I think a lot of leaders need to work on, is how are they influencing their people? It's not a case of communication. Communication's an idea plus communication by itself, it's still not going to work. It's only with that third element, which is influence, that's going to create any action or any evolution. And if you want to have your staff evolve into that level of high performance that you envisage for yourself, your organization, and everyone around you, you have to have a look at the way you're influencing them.
Yeah, I like that. That might be the podcast title.
Bang.
Saves me using ChatGPT later for it, doesn't it?
Well, ChatGPT is good to a point.
No, I think I've got enough. No, that's great. Amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today. So thank you for coming on as one of our guests. Can you just give us the details of your podcast as well, so that that anyone that's listening can head over and subscribe and make sure they've got yours on their list as well, because I think it'll be very, very valuable for them to have some different content to absorb.
Yeah, well, you can find my podcast on my website. It's probably easier. So you can find it on andyreid.com.au. And there's a podcast tab there. And it actually, you can watch on YouTube. You can download via Spotify, Apple. It's called High Performance Humans, the High Performance Human Podcast. And I've purposefully gone outside of the industry. So there are some industry specific people, but there's a lot of people that aren't. And I've done that on purpose because high performance comes in all shapes and sizes. One of my best conversations with a lady called Francesca, who has got cerebral palsy, and she's a CP warrior, she calls herself, and high performance for her obviously comes in a very different form. Having said that, though, she abseils down buildings, and she's in a football team, and she's just got a modeling contract. And
wow.
You know what I mean? So high performance comes in all shapes and sizes, and that's one of the real key things that I wanted to highlight with a lot of it. Like the podcast that's coming out this week actually is with a guy he's a British mixed martial arts champion, been over to Thailand and beat the crap out of all the Thai kickboxers, and he's been deaf from birth.
Wow.
And so we did the whole conversation with Sean the interpreter. So it was a 3-way with his sign language interpreter.
Wow.
And it was one of the coolest conversations, because at one stage his old man jumped on. His whole family's deaf, and his old man jumped on as well. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm a podcaster." And he goes, "What's a podcast?" I said, "The thing you're on right now, my friend." It was so funny. It was so cool. Such a natural podcast. But that guy there, Thomas, like when you think of MMA fighters, you think of big burly and alpha and all this sort of shit. And don't get me wrong, he's a hard nut, right? But the way that he sees life based on the natural adversity that he's had to grow up with, he's some man. He's some human, man. Seriously, some human being. And I've got loads of people like that are really cool on there. So go onto my website and you'll find it on there. But yes, and then hopefully this book that I've got coming out soon will help a few more people as well.
Yeah. Do you have a name for the book yet? Or
It's available on Amazon to pre-order already. I didn't realize it was going to be, but then I found out last Monday that it was. So it's due out. It's due out on shelves and everything on January 28th. Great. It's called Success Curious.
Yeah.
How to define and achieve high performance. And a lot of the stuff in there, is stuff that people have already heard, but I'm putting it into terminology and explaining it in a way that hopefully helps people to properly connect. I want it to influence people to feel like they can, as opposed to just hearing the white noise that they hear ad nauseum at conferences, like what you said, and it goes in one ear and in 48 hours, it's out the other ear, right? So hopefully it helps. Hopefully it helps a few people to kick on and feel a little bit more enriched.
Fantastic. So thank you so much. So Andy Reid, you can jump onto Amazon and pre-order his book, Success Curious. So that's 28th of Jan. And also that High Performance Humans podcast, I think will be a fabulous one. I am a huge fan of listening and watching content that is outside the industry. So for me, that's right up my alley, as I know it will be for many of those listening today. So Andy, thank you. So good to see you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Ash. It's been an absolute privilege.
Property Assist understand that business owners are rapidly expanding their rental portfolios and property managers simply can't handle everything on their own. Property Assist are now offering outsourcing in Western Australia, New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland, and can help your team with all their ingoing reports, outgoing final bond inspections, routine inspections, 360 tours, home opens and inventory reports. Find them on your socials.